Good evening. I would like to call our meeting to order. Ms. Steele, if you please call the Board of Supervisors to order. Roll call.
Mr. Gibson? Here. Dr. Orth? Here. Mr. Hutson?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Here.
Mr. Bazzani? Here. Mr. Nicosia? Here. All present.
All right, well, the Gloucester County School Board welcomes everybody to T.C. Walker Auditorium. We've been in recess since 5:39, so I can entertain a motion to come into open session.
Okay, I move to reconvene into open session and certify that the Gloucester County School Board, while in closed session, discussed only public matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements provided in subsection A of section 2.2-3711, and that only public business matters that were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered.
Can I have a second, please? Is there any questions or discussion? Okay, I hear none. Ms. Brazil, can you please poll the board?
Mr. Drew?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Andersen?
Yes.
Ms. Saulman?
Yes.
Ms. Scruggs? Yes. Ms. Arsenovic?
Yes.
Yes. At this time, we're going to ask if you'll stand as Dr. Orth give us our invocation, and we're happy tonight to have Mr. David Washington from Peasley Middle School that will lead us into our Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we are thankful for your many blessings on our county. As officials of this wonderful county, please guide us in doing what is right for our citizens as we discuss the upcoming budget. We face difficult choices that we all know we may find challenging. Please give us the wisdom to make the best decisions for our county. And all these things we pray and ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Orth. Thank you, David, for leading us into the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. At this time, we will have the adoption of our agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had something to read about Mr. Washington.
Okay.
Can I do
Yes.
that? Where are you? Where did you go? Okay. David Washington is an 8th grade student from Peasley Middle School. David is a member of the Peasley Student Council. David plays the piano, is an avid reader, and loves to write his own short stories. His math teacher shares that he makes his own math warm-ups to challenge his math teacher. David loves learning and is a model student at Peasley. His teachers share that he has really blossomed as an 8th grade student this year. Thank you, Mr. Washington.
Okay, awesome. At this time, we will have the adoption of our agenda for the Board of Supervisors.
So moved.
Second.
Any question? All in favor?
The school board, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
A second?
Second.
Are there any questions, discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you.
At this time, we'll have matters presented by the Board of Supervisors. Any matters from the Board of Supervisors? Okay, seeing none.
All right. Make a motion to, I can entertain a motion to accept the discussion. We were in closed session to address what we discussed in closed session.
Yep, Madam Chair, I move that the board appoint Fred Brewer as an interim board member for the vacant at-large position with a term ending 12/31/2025, and that the chair notify the appropriate folks to schedule the swearing-in ceremony ASAP with the goal of having Fred in place for the April meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? All right, we have a motion. It's been properly seconded. Ms. Brazil, can you please pull the board?
Mr. Drew?
Here.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Andersen?
Yes.
Ms. Saulman?
Yes.
Ms. Scruggs?
Yes.
Ms. Arsenovic?
Yes. So we want to thank all the candidates who submitted their name for our consideration. We really do appreciate it. And we are delighted to have Mr. Brewer as our new member of the board. So we appreciate that very much, too.
Okay, next, County Administrator items. Ms. Steele.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to remind the public that we will be having our first work session on Monday at 6 o'clock in the Colonial Courthouse. And then there will also be the Town Hall meeting, which will be here at TC Walker on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And then finally, anybody who hasn't registered for helping with the Clean Gloucester Day, which is on the 29th, please make that phone call to Clean Community and help us clean up the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Steele. Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to public comment. Oh, Superintendent, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Good evening, Mr. Smith, Mr. Arsenovic, members of the board. I do have just one reminder, and I know if I get this wrong, I'm going to be reminded this forever. We have several foundation members here. The Gloucester Educational Foundation is having its annual race, which supports public education, and many of our projects our teachers submit through their mini grants. And this race is scheduled for this Saturday, March 22nd at 8:30 a.m. You may pick up the materials at 4 p.m. on Friday at the high school. And again, I'm looking at the head nods. I think I got it almost right, but just want to remind folks that that event is happening.
Okay. Thank you, sir. At this time now, we'll move on to public comment period. We ask that you limit only your comments to the topic on the work agenda session for tonight. Anyone that would like to come now? You got it. Come on down, Mr. Mayor. Show his Cadillac wheelchair.
Not everybody can do that. Good evening, Mr. Chairpersons, members of the boards, Ms. Steele, Dr. Vladu, staff, Howard Maury, York District. I love these nights, two government entities sparring with each other over funding for a county which is financially insolvent. So we begin with your work session agenda item D. A simple solution to funding: go to the 1-cent sales tax account and reach in and do a transfer for the $2.5 million plus change to pay in full the cost for the change orders 1 through 17. Problem solved. It is still under the construction terminology. Item E. If I saw right in one of the many CIP papers, the school system was to receive no funding for the next 3 fiscal years, or has the walnut shell changed its hands? We really do not know who is doing the shuffle. May tonight a brighter light will be shed on the subject. Let us hope so. Item F, good luck. The page roof still leaks. Has any legal action been taken for the fix? Item I, the county in its infinite wisdom is being presented the annual tax increase document to support the 85% of the most budgets, the taxing 85% of most budgets, the tax increases to support the salaries and benefits of those employed, 10% to operate and maintain our infrastructure, and 5% for debt. Of special interest annually is the county's discrimination between the definition recreational items, since one is limited to water and one is limited to land. One pays 0 on water, values in millions, and the land-based values from hundreds to millions are taxed. Who is considered more privileged? Besides, over 10 years ago, the Commissioner of Revenue was going to present a fabulous account as to how much revenue was gained by taking the boat tax to 0. Interesting, as the B-pole tax increased, the marine repairs increased, the repair parts retailers have an increase in revenue, an increase on the meals tax and fueling taxes increased with this zero-based tax operation. We still wait for a report. We know we will die of old age waiting for an answer that is not forthcoming. With a broke county, what justification can you present that taxation with representation has shown positive influence over time? I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Mary. Is there anyone else?
I promise I'm not going to repeat Mr. Mowry as he repeated me at the school board the last time we had 1 and 2. Good evening, members of the boards, Dr. Vladu, and those who are here tonight, whether in person or electronically. My name is Larry Cohen, York District. On February 26th, I informed the board of their violation of Section 24.2-228 of the Code of Virginia by attempting to make an interim appointment of a replacement for a board representative who resigned for personal reasons. Section 228 is very specific in that it applies to an elected school board. The board is required to provide a list of candidates and their resumes to the public at least 7 days before making the appointment. The resumes, the requisite public meeting for the stakeholders to view is for the stakeholders to review the candidates. The board has historically operated without seeking the input of stakeholders. Several board members attempted to mitigate their misfeasance by citing that they, quote, always selected a replacement without publicly seeking stakeholder comment prior to the appointment. My view of that is, if I violate the law twice, do I get away with it a third time? Is that my defense? Mr. Gibson can talk later about that. Several board members This law has been violated by the school board for many years. Whether they sought school board counsel's advice on it is yet to be determined. They certainly didn't seek school board counsel's advice on this statute. Clearly, stakeholders have a right to comment on these candidates to the board prior to any appointment by the board. Now, there is another statute referred to in 228, 2.23707. This talks about how the notice to the public is to be taken care of. And this is where we have a very simple math problem that you'll soon come to see. It dictates that the board must post on its website notice of the date, time, and location of the public meeting dealing with the interim appointment, and must also make available to the public at such meeting all of the names of the candidates for the positions, as well as providing their resumes. The resumes and the names of the candidates were provided. They were left up at the desk up there with the agendas, and we were informed with that after most of us had sat down. But they did do that. Finally, the statute requires that such notice is to, quote,
Mr. Cohen, could you please wrap it up, sir?
I'm sorry?
Could you please wrap it up, sir? Could you wrap it up?
I thought we had
Close
5
it down.
minutes.
No, sir, 3 minutes.
Oh, this is Board of Supervisors?
Yes, sir.
I wish I'd known that before.
Thank you, sir.
Can I have the last minute as a courtesy?
I asked you, Cecil, would you wrap it up? You have a minute. You can wrap it up.
Thank you. Let me just find where I was. The board received a list of the candidates on Friday evening, March 7th. The first working day of the 3 working days in the statute was Monday. The meeting at which the public meeting was held was the next day, March 11th. Now, by my math, that's 2 days, not 3 days. And yet the board doesn't, all the teachers on the board don't seem to care. The meeting on the candidates requires postponement, and it could be done without harming anything. If this was done, then the candidate who just was announced might have the peace of knowing that he might not be eligible to take the oath of office. This is a farce, and we should be ashamed of ourselves to have our school board leaders breaking the law when they're supposed to be setting an example for the students. Thank you.
I'm Diane Jones from the Ware District. Last time we talked about the budget, I recommended that the administrator balance the budget. A lot of ways you can do that, especially in Gloucester County, like we did in Arlington County when I lived there for a long, long time. We had volunteer groups who did things instead of hiring a contractor. We had volunteers, I'm sure you have volunteers that would be more than willing to spruce up Beaver Dam Park. If you need landscaping around the high school, I bet you there's a bunch of kids that would love to learn how to landscape, and a teacher could teach them. In the meantime, you'd be saving a bunch of money by not hiring an expensive landscape artist. Also, you did basically minimally fulfill your obligation to notify the public about the candidates for school board replacement. You did that very, very poorly, I might add. It might have met a minimum standard, but it didn't meet a requirement of transparency that we're all needing to have from our elected leaders. I hope you're playing Candy Crush, Mr. Anderson. I'm sure you're really interested in public comment. I'm amazed it's not being put on the end of the meeting just like it usually is, so that everyone that needs to hear what we have to say has already left the building. That's it.
Is there anyone else? Seeing none, and we will move on to our work session agenda. First, on our work session agenda tonight, we have a oratorical award winners recognition by Dr. Darian Ford, Director of Secondary Education.
Good evening, GCPS School Board Chair, Ms. Arsenovic, Vice Chair, Ms. Parker, School Board members, and Dr. Vladu, Superintendent. Good evening as well, Board of Supervisors Chair, Mr. Smith, Vice Chair, Mr. Chriscoe, and members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm excited tonight to present the Secondary Accent on Academics, which highlights our second annual oratorical competition, and I wanted to provide some highlights as well as some recognitions. So this, our oratorical competition connects to our division's goal, strategic goal number 2, which deals with student connectedness, simply finding ways to connect our students to school, whether it's using clubs, activities, sports, or other activities as well to help students make those connections. So this year we sponsored year 2 of our oratorical competition, and the art of oratory pertains to the art of public speaking. So the design of the competition was twofold. The first was a prepared oration in which students were able to respond to the question, what responsibility do they have to help others achieve their dreams? And the second part of the competition was an assigned topic, which they had to respond impromptu to various quotes. So this year, our competition focused on the poet Langston Hughes and his poem Harlem, which was written in 1951. So this simple yet impactful question really afforded the students an opportunity to reflect on their core responsibility as family members, community, their school community, along with the community at large. So what was the outcome? I want to start with a short video vignette to kind of give you a quick glimpse at a great event that took place on March 7th.
What happens to a dream deferred? The word deferred means to put off or postpone. Dreams supposed to be something you wish to do in life. If they were deferred, then nobody would know what they aspired to do in life. Speaking of dreams, Langston Hughes states, "Hold fast to your dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly." Hughes is alluding to an individual spirit being hindered and cast aside.
What happens to a dream deferred is the opening line to Langston Hughes' poem, Harlem. This poem forces readers to ask themselves, do I have a responsibility to help others achieve their dreams? The answer? Technically, no. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Okay, but in all seriousness, do I have to help others achieve their dreams? As I said, technically, I don't. No one is obligated to help anyone else. But in this world, no one is alone, so we should all help each other. Humans are not like leopards or polar bears. We're not solitary animals. Going back to the beginning of the human race in Africa, people lived and hunted in small groups, never alone. My point is, no one on this planet is alone, and no one should ever have to feel alone, which is exactly why we have to help each other.
A dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together, that's reality. Yoko Ono describes the reality of collaborating as a team to achieve a dream. To do this, we must help each other. But how do we collaborate? Assisting others in reaching their aspirations might mean giving someone a ride to the library because they need to study in order to pass their final exam in college. Or offering support by simply actively listening to someone during a difficult time. Helping others achieve their dreams strengthens the foundations of a thriving community. As humans, we flourish through connections, which is why our society has progressed as far as it has.
All right. Outstanding. So with that video vignette, of course, student voice is so important. And I just have a few examples here. Really, it increases student achievement, of course, increases student engagement, and also ownership of their learning. So one thing in putting this competition together Of course, we always look to make connections to the curriculum and providing opportunities for students to extend their learning outside the classroom. So when we look at U.S. history, of course, there is a connection with Langston Hughes in the curriculum. Also, in middle school with civics, there is a connection in terms of giving students an opportunity to really think about their personal characteristics and how they can make an impact in terms of their decisions and how they can impact the community. And even with our African American history course at the high school, there's also a connection with the Harlem Renaissance along with Langston Hughes, so making those connections. Even when we look at our 2024 English standards, again, making that connection, particularly with 8th and 9th graders, those are the particular participants this year, really giving students an opportunity to develop their oral communication and collaboration skills, also kind of thinking logically about their ideas and being able to present to an audience, also explaining their ideas and making a compelling and convincing argument and really responding to text. So again, looking for opportunities to connect this competition to what the students are learning in their classes. So with that, we had our winners. Paula had a doctor's appointment tonight, but she was outstanding, did a great job. Also, Kaylin, I thought I saw come in, but she's on her way. And of course, the man of the hour, David Washington. So with that, I'm gonna have David come up. Yes. So Dave, great job, and he has a nice medal. Did an outstanding job. So Dave, you have a great talent for speaking, so it's definitely going to take you a long way. Outstanding, and his grandma's here as well. Okay, just wave. All right. Okay, Dave. Very good. Good job, Dave. Okay. One thing about this event, we had great teachers, Miss Carter DeMayo. Now, I emailed Miss Carter like 3 in the morning. But I want to thank Ms. Carter. She was outstanding. Yeah. All right. She had a fancy title. She was the liaison for the competition. And one thing about this activity, it definitely could not have really taken place without the community, which is so very important that as a school division, we involve our community in the work. So our 3 great sponsors, the Woodville Rosenwald School Foundation, the Gloucester NAACP, and our host, the Fine Arts Museum of Gloucester. So I'm going to have Dr. Parker come up. Have something for her. Thank you. And Dr. White Brown. Yes. Katrina, come on up.
Thank you.
Yes. It's an outstanding community partnership. And I think they have a few words that they want to share as well.
And here is Ms. Pam Griffin Armstead,
Okay, yes.
the
Okay,
president of the NAACP. Can she come up too?
But I think they had a few words they wanted to share to both boards about the event. So I want to thank them for their great partnership. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Get out of the way.
You can speak on behalf of all the judges, okay? What? You can speak on behalf of all of the judges. Well, thank you so much, everybody here that is here tonight. But you just saw the wonderful experiences of these youngsters. You saw the talent that is there. You saw the energy. You saw their intelligence. What we were there was just to see and bring it out, because it was so wonderful, and we're so happy with the teachers and the families. The teachers and the families that are making these youngsters come and continue to be the leaders of tomorrow. That's what we need. That's what we need, and we thank you for allowing us to be there. Dr. Ford, Dr. Vladu, everything that you've done for us. And of course, I want to introduce Pamela Griffin Armstead, our president of the NAACP. You may want to say a few words.
I do, very few. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the NAACP Gloucester chapter, we would like to thank you. We would like to thank everyone for all of their push that we give our young people. They are our future. We need to set a great example for them, and we're so proud of Kaylin. We're so proud of Kaylin, and I know her mother is very proud of her. So on behalf of the NAACP and the educational committee of the NAACP, we thank you.
Y'all really don't understand what a mistake it is to give a Baptist preacher a mic.
They were on the time limit.
With that being said, I just wanted to thank all of our community partners that have given these young people an opportunity to do what is most important in life, the ability to communicate with others. And it sounds clichéic, but it is nonetheless true. Communication is the key to our future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just outstanding partnership. So at this time, I can address any comments or questions from the boards. Oh, yes, come on. I'm sorry, Ms. Carter. Okay.
I just really want to thank the board, the Woodville Rosenwald School, the Gloucester NAACP, and the Fine Arts Museum for making this opportunity available to our children. And I really want to thank their families, because y'all have no idea how much parental support, grandparental support, pushing, it's getting easier. This is our second time doing this, and as cat herder in chief, I was very tickled to see how they put it together, because the day before we did this, kids were scared. Kids were afraid of, how am I going to stand up? How am I going to speak my truth in front of all these people who are going to be literally judging me? And they made it welcoming, and they made it fun. And by the time it was all over, people were like, maybe that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Maybe that was really cool. Mrs. Carter, can we do this next year? Well, as you see, the 2 highest place winners had done it the year before. So my hope is by the time they're seniors, they'll be like winning contests around the nation. But we really want to thank you, and it's just been a wonderful opportunity. It started off, we were voluntold, and it became a joy. So we really appreciate your help and support.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. All right, but at this time, any questions or comments from the boards?
No, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
very much.
Yes.
It was a wonderful program. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much.
Okay, moving on. Next is our presentation of work-based learning. Mr. Eugene Schick, work-based learning coordinator.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Vladu, Ms. Steele. Thank you. I am Gene Scheck, the Gloucester County Public Schools Work-Based Learning Coordinator. I'm going to give a presentation on my program here. Next slide. So one of our strategic goals for GCPS, goal 1, instruction and academic achievement. And the goal is to meet or exceed all annual state and federal performance benchmarks as a foundation for grade level readiness, college and career preparation, and excellence in citizenship and academic achievement. And how we're doing that, is by providing a number of college and career counseling activities, high quality work-based learning experiences for the students, increasing our relationship with business partners in the community, students getting industry certifications for the CTE programs that they are enrolled in, and such as a CNA or ASE certification for auto tech students, and getting students placed in jobs. Just some pictures of some of the things that our students, our CTE students, are doing. We've had events at the school, and just daily going on. We got carpentry, building, culinary, auto tech, and host or health sciences, which encompasses nurses aid, as well as EMT class, which is a new class, in our health assisting careers, agriculture, watering plants, and cybersecurity, criminal justice, NJROTC, and cosmetology. I hope I got them all. Next slide. And this is just some pictures of some of other events. We had a Skills USA event, leadership event. We hosted a leadership event right here in the cafeteria back in November. And it was a good event for networking for students. Skills USA is a career technical servicing organization that kind of helps students in CTE programs network with their like-minded CTE programs. We have some challenge. Chef always has challenges where he's either NASA. This one is at Virginia State University. Miss Nestor is always definitely involved in lots of competitions with HOSA, the Health Occupational Sciences Administration Association. And yeah, next slide, please. So work-based learning, what is it? Basically, we're bridging the gap between high school and high-demand, high-skill careers. Building on classroom-based instruction to basically develop employability skills, prepare them for success. Align with their interests, give them exposure to professional work settings and expectations, motivate them through feedback from their workplace supervisors, customers, and clients. So we're doing that basically by getting them these opportunities with the business community, the partners in our business. So we have students, which we will meet some of our students here in a little bit, working, our auto tech students working in some garages and other places as well, learning mechanics that's maybe a little bit outside of auto mechanics. Nurses' aides working as nurses' aides. Cosmetology students working as cosmetologists in hair salons. We got students working in here, and it's building on their instruction that the CTE teachers are giving them, and they're getting feedback from the supervisors and to help improve them in their field, and hopefully also to help place them when they do graduate, or at least at the very least keep them employed through internships throughout the year and the summer. And how we do that, we assess that through training agreements. The students will enter a training agreement with their CTE class, with me, with the business partner, and with their parents, and you know, everybody's involved, and we all have expectations of each other. So that's how we kind of assess how they're doing in that. So next slide. So I mentioned pretty much all the courses we have, but our top 5, I mean, the biggest one in law and service would be NJROTC. It's a 4-year program, so we're going to definitely have the most students in that. But health science, pretty up there. And a big reason for that growth, again, I mentioned we have an EMT class now. So, and that's not all that, though. I mean, Ms. Nestor's done a good job at growing that program as well. Construction is a very popular program, culinary arts and auto. I like to think all our programs are pretty successful, but these are our top ones as far as numbers go. Next slide, please. And it's the way we're talking about high quality work-based learning opportunities, the way we get them opportunities in the community might be an internship, an externship, clinical experience. There are apprenticeships. We have not done any apprenticeships because that requires employers to be registered as as apprenticeships. So that's something I'm trying to work on getting some employers to do, but it takes legwork for employers. But we do pretty good with like internships, students, and most of these are paid. I mean, there is a rule of thumb. A lot of people think internships unpaid, but these are mostly paid. If there's a rule of thumb, if you're having them do work that you might pay an employee for, then you should pay them. So these are paid internships for the most part, where they might go, especially seniors that might have an early out, will go early to work and work in the field. And externships are more, they're a little bit smaller piece, so it's not quite as long as an internship. Internship, like I said, might go all year, might go summer. Externship might be like a week-long, 40-hour view of a career. Maybe take a look at maybe the different aspects of that career, maybe like where you would, if you were in a bank, say you would go with the bank manager, the loan department, stuff like that to get all aspects of that career. Clinical experience that's our medical. So again, the jumping number there would definitely indicate, our new EMT program. So clinicals are where the students that are certified nurses' aid students and EMTs, they have to do their clinical experiences with hospitals, or EMTs would be with like the volunteer fire departments, Gloucester Volunteer and Abingdon. And they do actual required clinical experiences to get their licensing. Next slide. And these are the programs that are built into the classes. School-based enterprise is where, as many of you might know, some of our classes, culinary, will bake things for customers. they make lunches for the staff every day where we can buy lunch, and it's usually it's always really good, but there's usually a nice variety. Auto tech, they may work on cars, agriculture, they sell plants, they groom animals, and cosmetology cuts hair. So a lot of our programs are in school-based enterprise. The supervised agriculture experience, that's more detailed in an agricultural area for our agriculture class. And a co-op, small numbers, and that's kind of going to be probably more replaced with like internships and apprenticeships. But the co-op, our only co-op that we have is auto tech, and that puts students that are in their third year of auto tech into a garage. So we're pretty much doing that with internships anyways with students that might even be before their third year. Okay, so now our students there, we have 3, 2 of them couldn't show up. I think they're working in the salon, but we have 2 nurse aide, Mackenzie Penn, Layla Nestor, and then when they're done, Keith Shelton will come up, our auto tech student. Come up and give a...
So pretty much I got out of clinicals, and when I was at my penning ceremony, Dockside had paid for our cake, and inside the little gift bags they made for us was a card to apply. So I applied, and it's definitely one of the best things I've ever done in my life. I enjoy my job a lot, and actually 5 other CNAs taught by Ms. Nestor have applied there, so I am working with the same people I went to clinicals with, and it is amazing. I really enjoy my job. I go in right after school, so I get out after first block and I go to Dockside and I help the residents get up. I'll change them. If they want to go to the activities room, they'll go. I like going to activities with them because I have never seen people get so mad over horse racing until working in that nursing home. They gamble. It is great. They all have very unique personalities, and even though sometimes they will cuss me out, I still really enjoy helping them out because sometimes they are definitely really sweet to me. So it's worth it in the end.
I graduated the nurse aide. I'm too short for this. I graduated the nurse aides class my junior year, and right after I was able to get a job at Gloucester House off of Main Street. I've been working there for almost a year now. I know 5 students have gotten jobs from graduating Miss Nestor's nurse aides class, and I've definitely learned a lot. I've gotten opportunities to become a med tech and an LPN, and I definitely prepared me for when I go to college to get my RN.
Good afternoon. I'm Keith Shelton. So I was a second-year auto tech student, and now I work at the Gloucester Matthews Gazette. Pretty much right now I'm just learning kind of the basics on how the press operates, how to feed papers through it, measure ink levels, make sure everything's running properly, and making sure the papers look good. Yeah. So I enjoy it so far.
Thank you. Last week at the board meeting, we did, and as I mentioned before, we deal with a lot of businesses in the community. We had 3 local businesses that were nominated for the Virginia School Board Association Business Honor Roll: Chesapeake Bank, Gloucester Toyota, and Miller Services. Next slide. But that's not all. We have lots of businesses, and we're not going to spend a lot of time looking at that because I might have forgot someone. I don't want anyone to feel bad. So we have a lot of businesses. Next slide, please. Some of the upcoming events that I have. In April, we're going to have a hiring event. Last year, I kind of did a graduating senior hiring event. This year, I kind of want to expand it because hiring seniors is great, get them full-time jobs, absolutely. But we also, have students that are sitting home doing nothing. Also, I'm going to include some summer employment from that, and that's based on some of the feedback I get from some of the businesses here. They would definitely love to hire some of our students for the summer. May, Going to have a signing day, which is, to kind of mirror the sports signing day, where graduating seniors with a full-time job offer or a military enlistment contract are going to get recognized on the stage. Well, we don't have the auditorium now, so in the gym, we'll get recognized for their future. And over the summer, something that we've been doing at school for a few years, Summer Skilled Trades Boot Camp. We're doing that in July. It'll be a two-week paid job shadowing program, basically, to, I guess, kind of put it in like how I did it last year. I want to expand on it this year, but last year I had Miller Services, Gloucester Toyota, had students that basically did 7 work days, full work days, in septic, plumbing, HVAC, electric, and then auto repair, auto parts, and auto sales. So they got a taste of both auto and your building trades. They spent 8 hours with professionals and kind of learning it. And it got really good feedback from the students and the employers as well. So I'm looking to expand it this year. Ultimate goal, like I said, I told you all about all the CTE programs I had, is to cover all of them, so no one's left out. Next slide. Next steps, we're optimizing career and academic planning in middle school. We do spend time in the middle school because they're coming up to the high school. I mean, recently we had the middle schoolers come up and visit our CTE programs. One of the slides in there was a couple of them where the middle schools came in and they visited the CTE program so they could see what we're doing. We've gone to the middle school, we've talked to the middle schoolers, but it's a little bit better when they get to come and get a taste of it and they see when they walk in the classroom. And a lot of them will say that they know that's what they want to do because now that they saw it being done, it helps them make a decision. I'm also looking to develop the Engaged GCPS database. Basically, that's a database to hopefully, interactive to have our business partners at the flick of a switch, basically. So on a computer, on a database, teachers could find a business partner that only maybe wants to do guest speaking, or we could find someone that wants to hire people, and the nice thing about it is the idea of it is to vet them as well. So we know that we're not just talking to someone off the street. We have them vetted beforehand. We want to increase our work-based learning experiences by 10% or more, and leverage our CTSOs, which is our career technical student organizations, to enhance the learning. So that's our Skills USA, our FFA, our Future Business Leaders of America, to help beyond the classroom, get them more involved in networkings with like-minded students in other schools in Virginia and in the U.S. And begin recruiting for the Summer Skills Trade Bootcamp. Yes, I got the emails out there looking for students to man the boot camp. And we're looking also we're always trying, we get feedback from the business partners on a lot of things as well. Our courses that we should be teaching, and welding and HVAC's probably been talked about for probably many years. And we're, hoping to expand our classes so we can include those 2 very high need programs at the school. Next slide. Any comments or questions? Yes.
So I recently talked to Dr. Vladu about this particular topic. Individuals who who worked professionally for 30 years in plumbing, HVAC, particularly individuals who work at Newport News Ship, who are retirees. What is the law? Do they have to have a 4-year degree to teach these students how to weld?
To teach CTE programs?
Yeah, any of those programs. Do they have to have a 4-year degree to teach students how to weld?
Not necessarily, no.
to
I mean,
plumb?
CTE programs are typically career switch, and I'm no expert on that. I mean, that would be deferred probably to our HR. But I know we have teachers that do not have bachelor's degree. It's not a requirement. And most of the requirement is in their industry certification.
Well, that's my point. Is that do they really need that? I mean, if they have 30 years of professional experience, obviously they'd be the great, other than maybe a lesson plan or 2 that could be developed simply. I mean, couldn't you bring those people who want to get out of retirement and do something because
Absolutely.
they're bored with tears at home and their wives don't want them at home anymore. And so it could be that they might be interested in doing that. Yeah, So it might be that they might be interested in something like that.
Absolutely. When we do recruit for teachers, we are looking at, we're looking at the business professional, the ones that have the certifications.
But to teach auto mechanics or plumbing
Most auto
or
mechanics
HVAC,
don't have
I mean, you don't need to have a 4-year degree to do that, right?
Right.
I'm just curious.
No, yeah, and it's not a requirement.
If I could clarify, because I think that's very important, we are turning more and more to industry professionals to fill some of these vacancies. but I can emphasize how important is the pedagogy. I think part of it is if you're training a technician one-on-one in a coaching situation as an adult versus managing a classroom of ninth graders, 15, 6 of them, and thinking about, what's the best way to learn both the fundamentals and the safety skills, as well as, teaching 15 is very different than teaching 1. So in my experience, your lesson planning, whether you're teaching English 9 or math or auto mechanics, is very, very similar. Now it's in a shop setting and all of that. Now, we do need to develop teacher support programs. We need to develop mentoring programs. And we need to support our folks because we want to set them up for success when they come in. So we are relying, and you are correct, you do not need a 4-year degree, but certainly need to love children, to do well, to maintain a very professional environment, and to be able to want to learn pedagogy.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question, but a comment. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tony.
So now to talk about what I do for a living, Mr. Scheck there and I work pretty closely together. So I've got a couple of comments that I think, speaking from that wheelhouse, I'm going to bring out. The most important one is, if you want to see what your kids are doing outside of your core subjects, I'm sure that any of our CTE teachers would love to have any board member come by and visit. That's number one. Number two is when asked, and this is going to hit home, but it is what it is. When the CTE teachers are requesting funds, are requesting supplies, are requesting whatever they're requesting, they're not requesting it to stockpile it. They're requesting it to invest it in students like you saw tonight. So keep that in mind, because you see just a scratch of the surface of the product that the CTE programs at your high school are putting out. I know every one of these young men and women who came up here tonight, but there's many, many more that are invested in these programs and are goal-oriented to succeed. And with that, it's going to take your support, which we know we have, but it also is going to take that financial commitment. So as you go through the next month or so, keep in mind that every dollar you put into CTE is put right back into the students. Okay, so.
Okay. Any other questions? I do have a comment.
Okay.
Mr. Chick, I was glad to hear that you mentioned grooming, the agriculture and the veterinarian science class.
Yes.
Today I had the opportunity to take Zoe.
I saw.
You saw Zoe? A lot of kids do, because they kept coming up saying, Mr. Smith, we saw Zoe. But I got the opportunity to take Zoe, my 1.5-year German Shepherd, in today, and she got her shampoo, and she got her nails done. So we're hoping tonight that my wife will let her on the bed. But they did a wonderful job, and the kids loved her, and she, for some reason, she loves going to the school.
Yeah, she loves kids.
It's an awesome program.
All right.
I could add to that, too. I just wanted also to thank you for all you do, Mr. Scheck, and also all of the business partners that we have in Gloucester County. We are really fortunate. I mean, this is a lengthy list, and, I wish we could give a, recognition to all of them like we did last week. But this program wouldn't be as strong without that kind of partnership where kids could actually be working in an actual, it's wonderful that we have these CTE programs in the schools, but to actually be on site is huge. So we're very, very appreciative.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, moving on. Opioid settlement funds for fiscal year 2026 expenditure recommendation. Mr. Quentin Shepard.
Good evening, Mr. Smith,
Ms. Arsenovic, members of the board. I know you have a lot to get through tonight, so I'm going to make this pretty quick. I'm presenting this on behalf of Mr. Steve Wright, who's done the majority of the work behind this, but he is attending a conference out of the area tonight. So basically, we are asking you tonight, and I've got a brief presentation, but what it comes down to is we're requesting approval to continue 4 of the 5 initial projects that we began last year with your blessing, and then also to add 2 new projects, which include, and I'll just run through the ones that we've been working on. The prevention and treatment specialist has been one of the most successful initiatives that we've had so far. That particular person has reached over 30 students, many of whom self-referred themselves to come in and receive treatment, and then has also provided prevention services to another 300 students. So we really would like to continue on with that program. We'd also like to continue forward with the comprehensive resource guide. This is a guide that we put together in-house, and it's digital and in print for people to try to go and have a centralized place. If they're in the middle of struggling with addiction, they have a guide on where they can go and what types of treatment that they can receive. The next program that we've implemented is the Ride to Recovery, where we're subsidizing transportation for those who can't afford it to receive their therapeutic counseling or MAT treatment. One of the largest barriers we discovered when we reached out and had the community meetings and stakeholder meetings was people were interested in getting to their treatment, but they didn't have the transportation to do so. So this has helped combat some of that problem. And then also helping to subsidize the MOUD and MAT treatments locally using or through the Northern Neck Regional Jail. So those are the projects that we have been doing that we hope to continue to do. The 2 new projects include subsidized residential or inpatient rehab bed fees. This is to help subsidize those who may come out of a prison situation or leave outpatient situation and need to go to an inpatient situation but don't have the ability to pay for the inpatient treatment. So that would follow those individuals to the location that they seek treatment from as an inpatient format. The last thing is one of the biggest players in helping make opioid abatement successful is the peer support certification training. So our peer support specialists really help connect with those struggling with addictions in ways that we cannot do so, those of us who are not struggling. These folks have been through addiction. They're working on continuing to overcome addiction, and they can relate to those who are currently struggling. And then the last thing here that we're requesting is a project contingency fund of $5,000, which would cover the cost if any of these programs may run over. We certainly don't want to turn anybody away if they get involved in one of these programs and we get close on funding. So the proposed total that we're requesting for FY26 is $365,230, and I believe there is a resolution in your packet, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions, and if I can't answer them, I will get answers for you. Any questions? Okay.
Were we shown this before this presentation tonight? We weren't shown this before to consider it?
I'm not sure what you're asking, but this is...
I've seen this.
Correct. It's the first time we've all seen it. But this is the opioid funds that we have been given from the settlements from various
Correct.
entities.
grounded.
This is not,
Yeah,
this
this
is
is
not
not
Gloucester
any
County
general
money being
fund.
spent. But these are the things that we are able to do with this money that has been sent to us from the various, and Ms. Steele can probably name the ones that have come from, but that's what this is for.
You beat me to the ground. Thank you.
I'd like to make the motion to approve.
I know I'm not part of the decision. What is MAUD?
It's a type of treatment, and I don't know off the top of my head what it's medical. I know Matt is medical assisted treatment,
Okay.
so it's very similar to that.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any question, any further question, discussion? None other, Ms. Steele?
Dr. Orth? Yes. Mr. Hutson? Yes. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Nicosia? Yes. And Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Okay, moving on. Gloucester High School renovation and contingency fund update. Mr. Hartley, Deputy Superintendent.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Board of Supervisors, school board members.
Yes, sir.
I get to have hopefully a lively presentation because it's a bunch of pictures, and I get to talk you through it. And I saved the numbers for the end so we can kind of go through pictures and tell a story, and then really get to the contingency fund, and I will tell you what these things go into. And a large part, contingencies for things that are kind of unknown, and we found a lot of stuff that's unknown, and then as we uncover and peel back that onion and find more and more things that we need to address and move some things around. So I'll start with pictures and kind of talk you through this. One of the big things we had to do is get under the slab at Gloucester High School to replace stormwater and wastewater lines. The picture in the left side, you can actually see how far in the ground these lines go. And this ended up being work that was not original to the, part of the original scope of the project. So I'll get to some more of that as I go on. But that's just one example of it. There's another example of a stormwater line on the right side going to tie in outside. Go ahead, Joe. And again, several examples of what's happening underneath the slab. And when they do this, they have to go in and tear up whatever flooring is there to include the terrazzo, which there's a picture of that later in the presentation. Saw cut the floor, get equipment in, bring that concrete out, dig this out to get to everything. And in a few slides, I'll show you what they were actually digging up. This is the infrastructure for the newly renovated restroom on C Hall. And the next slide will show you on the left, they're starting to get some tile in on the walls, and on the right, the tile going down on the floor. Again, that's the new restroom on C Hall, which will now be numbered the 200 hallway. And this is the slide that shows you what we were pulling out of the ground. This is ductile iron from 1973, 1974, and you can tell that it is not held up too well. That's some of it on the cart, and the center is tie-ins. And then the pictures on the far right are what happens when the workers picked it up out of the ground. It literally just fell apart. Another picture of them trying to get to the lines. You can kind of see where they saw cut on the floor. Those lines that are popped up in the middle of the picture are simply conduit that they had to get out of the way to get to the pipes underneath the slab. Yes, sir.
You mentioned terrazzo being taken out. Was that new terrazzo that was put in and then had to be taken out to get to this piping?
No, sir.
Okay.
Yep. I'll add to that when I get to that picture. So I mentioned a lot of the change orders in this project not being part of the original scope of work. This is one of them. This is actually the kitchen floor, and we learned as we got into this project that all the plumbing and all the electrical underneath the kitchen floor needed to be replaced. Again, not part of the original scope of the project. You can see the tile that they had to rip out. That's the original tile on the left. These are guys putting the tile back in on the right. There's some other pictures. So next is more of them pulling these tiles up and saw cutting the floor. This was extensive work. And prior to them getting to this, they had to pull all the kitchen equipment out to be stored. more work in the kitchen, and then I think the next picture is them actually working on plumbing and electrical. You advance to that. Yes, this is also in the kitchen. So you can see to what extent that had to go, and I'll talk about that change order when we get to that number slide. These next set of pictures are under slab piping that we had to get to on C Hall. Again, not part of the original scope of the project. You can see clearly these pipes would not work if we left them intact. This is another picture of pipes that are under the floor in C Hall. You can see why we were having some drainage issues on those lines. And I will tell you, the currently occupied classrooms that are on C Hall right now all have under slab work that need to be done. And again, not part of the original scope of work, but we cannot leave things in this condition. All right, Mr. Bazzani, this is the original terrazzo. We knew we had to saw cut the floor in many areas, and the original scope of the project said that we would patch the terrazzo. That's what patched terrazzo looks like. So we opted for a rather large change order to relay terrazzo over top of this, negotiate the price, and unfortunately that price included areas that were getting cut. There's one area that got left off, and that is the current cafeteria. That's terrazzo. So on the next slide, you'll see on the left, that's the new entrance at Gloucester High School. The medium gray color is the terrazzo color that will go throughout the rest of the building. The terrazzo on the right is the original terrazzo to the school. It did not get included in this quote because there's no saw cutting that was going on in the cafeteria. But clearly we have decisions to make because the new epoxy terrazzo and the concrete terrazzo don't really match. So, yes, sir.
Just another curious question. Why wasn't the contractor, why didn't the contractor who is renovating high school identify these hidden issues when they were evaluating, renovating this high school?
So what happened through?
Did they have maps of the piping and say, hey, do we need to check this? Or did they, they should have done their due diligence and say.
So, it wasn't the contractor. Mosley, the architects, the ones that built the design and put the bid packet together and put it out. The contractor bid on what was put out on the street, so to speak.
So Mosley didn't catch this potential issue?
I think some of those decision-making or decisions were made over a long period of time, and from what I understand, the dollar amount to fund the project changed to some extent. And as it went on, this is what was put out at the bid project, at the bid process, sorry. I would agree with you that it would be a safe assumption that what the pipes look like under A Hall would look the same under C Hall. We added this, again, this is them prepping the area to re-pour concrete after they did under slab work. There are things that weren't included in the original scope of the project that we tried to fold into the project and found that it was necessary to do so. And there are other things that are absolutely a necessity. This wasn't the exact picture, but I know when we were going into the boys' locker room, we found out that there was a wall that was installed in the 1993 edition, and the drainage underneath it wasn't done correctly. It was compromised. It was a load-bearing wall. So in order to remove that load-bearing wall, we had to pay Gresham to design and install a steel I-beam to support the roof that was above this wall. So again, large change order that we weren't anticipating, but had to be done. This is the 200 hallway. What many of you will know is the C hall. You can see this under the slab work is from the beginning of the hall all the way to the end, and through the cross halls as well. Just another picture of pipe that was pulled out from underneath the slab. You can see it's in poor condition. And inside, for stormwater and wastewater, we had to tie the outside line. So the picture on the left-hand side, again, you can see the floor with a little bit of red paint on it on the right side. That's how far down in the ground they were coming out of the building, and to the right, just an example of them coming out of the building.
Thank you. One more question.
Yes, sir.
Were these issues discovered post-renovation or prior to renovation of these areas? I mean, did you renovate and then all of a sudden you found you had to do this and rework all of this hallway?
I think it depends on the issue.
I'm not certain, but were there some issues where you refurbished something and then you had to go back and tear it back out again because the contractor or the designers said we missed this and
No,
now
there's
they
none
want
of
a
that.
change order? Okay, none of that.
No, there's nothing that had to be reworked.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can see, again, extensive amounts of flooring being pulled out, and then, they did the work they had to do, and they put their vapor barrier down and the support in and pouring concrete. On the right, this is getting to the end of this project. The contractor's getting creative. This is actually an empty classroom that's currently under construction. The classroom on the other side of it is actually cosmetology, where water lines needed to be replaced. And of course, we don't have the ability to displace cosmetology, so they did it from that side of the wall, and that's them patching the wall back up. And again, more of the same. The bottom left picture, if I'll add, is actually underneath the stage floor in the auditorium, because there's bathrooms on either side of that stage. Again, the piping was like it was everywhere else. It was the ductile iron pipe. We had to get to it. In order to get to it, we had to rip the stage floor up, which was in questionable condition anyways. So we'll have to replace the stage floor. And later in the presentation, I'll show you some of the work that's being done in the high school. But again, original scope called for very little amount of work to be done in the auditorium. Again, more of the same, getting ready for brake testing, that picture on the left, and more pipe underneath the ground on the right. We added the electrical service because, again, a lot of these costs for this project are just not seen, but we have 28 units in use outside, portable units, and every 2 gets the same hookup as a residence would get. So that's the electrical going in. You can see the large conduit going underneath the portable classroom. Many of you will remember this. This no longer exists. This was the driving tower that was on our driving range. It needed to go. It was beyond repair and certainly not up to code. So again, one more thing that just kind of needed to be taken care of. All right, I'd mentioned the auditorium. If you would kind of pay attention to the sound panels on the wall, kind of in the left side and the back side of the picture, it give you some idea how tall and how expansive this scaffolding is. But they are in the auditorium working, and the next picture will show you just how high up they are. I think that platform is 17 feet off the ground. So a couple people have had an opportunity to see that in person. So it's certainly up there. And now some finished products. We certainly put some effort into the drama room. Some people will remember the drama room used to be on A Hall. That pit's now been covered up, and we converted the old chorus room into the drama room. It's blacked out. In the next picture, you can see the lights that we put in. So really a nice space for this classroom, for this program. And then, again, like I said, it's over on the Performing Arts wing now. And I think we have a picture of the finished band room next. And then following that is the chorus room. And this is actually brand new square footage. This is an add-on to the building. And then I think we have a couple of pictures of the reworked library. And then lastly, the extended learning area, which I believe at one point in time prior to my arrival to Gloucester County Public Schools, this was a smoking pit, or it was an outside area. The courtyard, I think, is what the kids have named it. And then it became the school counseling office and the clinic. That's all has been since removed, and celestial glass has been installed. So I will say that this space gets used frequently. And now I'm told I need to go over numbers. So we are at the contingency fund. if I can pull your eyes down to the bottom, we started with 5.2 about $1 million in contingency. We're now at 1.3. It's hard to believe we were 2 years in this project, looking at 6 months left to go. But when you get to that number, you have to really scrutinize and prioritize. But if you look through these change orders, we try to pare down the descriptions, but every change order has many, many lines and many, many items and projects in them. But we just kind of try to give you the gist of them. But you can see some numbers, and I think number 4 is the terrazzo flooring, which is one of the larger ones. And some of the bigger ones include the kitchen, and the kitchen was broken up between a couple of them, between plumbing and electrical. So with that, I will see if there are any questions.
Mr. Hartley, how much underground piping would you say hasn't been touched and potentially needs to be replaced still?
We have it to do in these occupied areas on Sea Hall right now. So we haven't encumbered those funds yet, but we have an idea that those need to be done. The only other thing that I can think of off the top of my head right now is there was one custodial closet that didn't get grabbed in the very first phase of the project. But they have we have that plan for this summer.
Back in my day when I was at the shipyard, we would do ship checks of submarines before we would overhaul them. And we'd send a team out there to evaluate what needs to be checked, what needs to be reworked. I know there's some known unknowns that come up during, overhaul. But I'm curious as to why, did Mosley come out and do, like a sample of some of these pipes to say that they need to be replaced? Or did they just do it from their office and say, here's a design and go and do? Did they come out
they
and
were
do
in the
core
field. I wasn't part of the decision or the rationale behind why some pipes got replaced and some didn't. They were here. They sent cameras down lines. I know that much. Again, that was, and part of it may be, again, I'm guessing some of this, but part of it may be that it was so long ago that whatever they scoped at that point in time seemed to be in decent shape.
Well,
I would question that logic.
You show some rotten pipes there that have probably been rotten for about 20 or 30 years. So
they've been in bad shape for a while.
That's not an example of that, right? Do you think that they dropped the ball on the design because they didn't check to see whether or not they had to replace this pipe?
I'm hesitant to answer that because I don't know what all they...
It's hard to answer a question like that.
Yeah, it is.
Madam Chair, I'd like to say, personally, no. I would say that this was an expected, normal set of circumstances, and it was clear. Mosley made it abundantly clear in every school board meeting, and I think they even spoke at a joint meeting once or twice, that this was fully expected and is normal. And I mean, it's really, when you peel back the layers of what a contingency fund is for, it's for these exact reasons. If people thought that they were going to not find anything as they went along, we wouldn't have contingency funds. So Mosley's, I mean, I won't say that everything was perfect, but there's been nothing as a school board member that I've really had to pause and go, well, Mosley could have caught that. You can't, it's not realistic to open up these systems until you're actually in the renovation phase. Even the best scope and everything is not going to be perfect. That's just my 2 cents as a board member that's been along for the whole process.
Mr. Hartley, I would like to express my sincere thank you to E.T. Grissom. We are in there every day, or I'm in there every day, and I'm throughout the building every day. And that group of men and women who are working on that project are some of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And they go out of their way to make sure that our instructional time and transfer of students from one place to the other, that they're not in the way. And they even ask, what if they're in a particular area, what are you getting ready to do so that we're not in your way? And I think that's important, that the public know that the company, not only what's going on, but the company that's doing the work is working with us and making sure that, our instructional day is not interrupted in any kind of way. So I think that's important.
No, thank you for saying so. And whenever we get an opportunity to recognize E.T. Gresham, we do so. It's been a wonderful working relationship. They keep us informed. They present, issues and solutions to us. And I even said in a meeting this morning that they presented some pretty ambitious schedules to Gloucester County Public Schools, and we look at them and they say we're going to get it done, and they always get it done. And if I can just take the opportunity for our own team, it's, Dave Miller and our staff and the technology staff is up in the ceiling working every day alongside of these subcontractors. And lastly, just to really acknowledge the staff at Gloucester High School. I mean, this has been an occupied renovation, and as smooth as Gresham makes it, it's still a construction site. There's been numerous interruptions. A lot of fire drills get unscheduled or rescheduled or whatever word you want to use. So they've experienced numerous interruptions because of it, and these are things that are unavoidable. But the staff and the students at Gloucester High School really handled it well. I was actually talking to Mrs. Kibler the other day when we were over at the high school to recognize Mr. Eccleston for his Teacher of the Year, or Region 3 Teacher of the Year. And we looked at each other and we're like, we're in this for 2 years now. It's hard to believe. So 6 months left to go. Things get tighter when time gets tighter, but we're certainly working to stay on time and on budget.
Do you believe that they've caught all of the unknowns now at this point in progress? You think we're not going to get any more surprises from unknowns? Do you think we've caught everything? That's a hard question.
What I've learned in the last 2 years is not to guess on that. We're confident, but they get in there and they start saw cutting these floors in these other 4 areas that are currently occupied, and we run across something we did like in the locker room. When they say, hey, we got a small problem, and it's $125,000 to fix it. That is why we're being very, very cautious with that 1.3, and we had a meeting today. Sorry to get off track for a moment, but we had a meeting today, and there's a change order sitting out there with $670,000 worth of changes that we have not approved yet, because we know what it will do to that number.
So, Ms. Steele, what is our balance in the 1 cent sales tax? One of the citizens mentioned $2.5 million. Is that true? Do we have $2.5 million?
We do, and in the proposed budget for FY26, it utilizes the reserve funds to replace the school's HVAC for 5 years' worth of HVAC. So it's...
Would we be able to use this money in case they eat up their contingency?
The board can choose to not fund the HVAC or change the HVAC and borrow the money differently. There's definitely, you only have a certain amount of money, but there's lots of ways to spend with the different projects.
No, I was just going to say, just to repeat, that no school's been missed during this construction. And kudos to the staff who worked during the holidays, over Christmas break, moving furniture, because as each hall was closed, they had to move those classrooms out to the modulars. Then they have to move them back when it's finished. And it's a really intensive amount of work, and it's done, on above and beyond time. So we're grateful for the progress you all made.
It's been nice, and just to circle back to Gresham, because we can't just pick up and move at any time. It needs to be at a natural break in the calendar, whether it's a semester or Christmas break or over the summer. So it's the kind of thing that time bounds Gresham, but again, they give us a timeline, and they meet it. They've met it every time.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hartley, I would like to thank you and Mr. Miller for the tour a while back, first and foremost. You mentioned a minute ago when Ms. Scruggs asked about the piping. Is that part of the regular budget? That's not a contingency thing that you have on C Hall 200? Is that
part of C Hall was part of the original scope? I would say most of C Hall was not.
Okay, but you mentioned something about being encumbered. Is that coming out of contingency for those, or is that the regular budget so far for that?
That would be contingency.
Contingency. The other question I have is, you mentioned it, I don't think you mentioned the dollar amount you told us, but for the public viewing at home, you have a number here of $600,000 for the terrazzo floor covering now. What's the cost for the remainder of that old Duke Rock Cafe, just so we have it? Because we have to do that. We can't, we can't do everything and then leave that little square, because it's going to look like a sore thumb.
No, I understood. We are kind of going back and forth and trying to work on that price that we shared the other day. Forgive my hesitancy, but I just want to make sure that the number that we talked about earlier in the week is where we actually are. It saves us quite a bit, probably 3/4 of what we talked about.
Perfect.
Now, still
That's
significant
fantastic.
cost. But
It is, but we got to figure out a way to get that done.
Right.
And I will do everything I can to make sure that gets done.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to remind the board that this is, this contingency fund has been discussed for a couple of years, and the hope was that there would be few of these fines that did happen. It's the reality. We knew you had to have the money there, but the board had approved that contingency funds could be used to work on the outside of the school to do the additional parking layout and things, which the school system is still working on. But, and so I was kind of, one, reminder, and then two, based on what you're saying with the 1.3, I haven't heard the estimated cost. I know there's like a left side, right side, or east-west for the parking outdoor changes. So I don't know how much they cost, but do you anticipate, as best to your ability, do you think there'll be any contingency left that could be able to address the terrazzo or help with the outside? Or when will you feel more confident with that?
We're waiting on an answer about some turn lanes. You know, if that is a
I know y'all are waiting, and I hope that that's not going to be a problem. And I mean, I'm thinking like under best case scenario that you don't have to put in the turn lane based with the conversation that we had with VDOT. I really don't think you're going to have to, but you just got to get it officially.
So, yeah, we were hoping to have a little more contingency at this point than we do. But again, the things that we fix had to be fixed. You know, paint and new windows and new doors looks great, but the infrastructure of the building has to be there and has to be functional. So what we did do, though, in not knowing what the contingency was, is kind of split the site work up to the east side of the building and to the west side of the building and put a priority on the east side of the building. And we know now that's where our focus is going to be if we get this thing out to bid soon. And we might have to go back and kind of adjust it and not do some things to the point that we thought we were going to do. But our priority is student safety. And the work on the east side of the building would kind of shift the student parking lot over and separate it from the bus loop so that students weren't walking in front of buses and students weren't walking in front of student drivers and things like that. So that if that's all we can do, then that would be our priority. And there's some things that would be nice to do, but that aren't as necessary as those two things. All right, I think I'm up next.
Okay, you're up next.
But this one's short, so I was asked to provide an update on capital projects. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. We are actually doing other work while the high school's going on, but luckily we've been able to complete it. And one of them really wasn't anticipated until the year before when some state construction dollars became available. But the Peasley HVAC project has taken multiple years to get the whole replacement done. Part of it's just because it's such a large system and there's a water source heat pump in every room that had to be replaced along with some pumps and boilers and things like that. So we have reached the final phase of that project with Peasley Middle School. And again, it took us like 4 or 5 years to get that done. The field house, some of you may recall, was part of a long-range capital plan, was the renovation for the sports complex. We were able to take that off our long-range capital plan this year because the state construction dollars allowed us to do the work that you see in front of you. I will take a moment to mention that the field house is the division's largest classroom, and we needed to make it safe. So now it has heat and AC. We've gotten rid of the louvers. We've put new metal up. We painted it, new insulation, new roof work. So it's a safe and secure and nice facility now. And then, as I mentioned, We are at Gloucester High School with that renovation. C Hall, they're really making a lot of progress, but we have those currently occupied spaces that we cannot move to another area, the big CTE programs. So the goal is to get to those spaces as quickly as possible. One program we might have to make some adjustments for to get Gresham in there a little bit earlier for more extensive work. So we were working with them to make that, working with Gresham and working with the high school to make that happen. And as you saw in the pictures, the work in the auditorium is currently underway. And I think that's it. I'll see if there's any questions about those those two projects and the high school project.
Any questions for Mr. Hartley?
All right.
Seeing none?
Thank you all very
Hartley.
much.
Yes. Okay. Moving on. Presentation of school board's proposed FY 2026 budget, FY 2026 to FY 2030 capital improvement plan. Dr. Vladu.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Ms. Arsenovic, Mr. Chriscoe, Ms. Parker, members of both boards, those who are here tonight in the audience, and those watching at home. As I begin this presentation and before I start presenting the content, I just want to say that I'm delighted and I'm very grateful to present the needs of almost 5,000 students, their families, as well as the 800 some employees that come to GCPS every day and work hard on behalf of everyone here. So we're very, very grateful. I'm very grateful to be able to present that. I'll be remiss if I don't recognize my team who has crunched these numbers. I have stopped counting how many times we have crunched these numbers, but we gladly do it because this work is important. This work is about students. And I also want to thank the county finance team who are in touch with us all the time. We're trying to make really, really hard decisions on behalf of the school community that benefits us and moves us forward. And sometimes this is hard, and sometimes we disagree, and sometimes that's okay because we come together as a family and move forward to do the best that we can for this community. So again, before I get started, I'm grateful for the opportunity to share those comments. So our first slide. All right, let's see if this thing is working. So one of the things that's important is public input. We know that the budget should never be created in a vacuum, that involve our stakeholders. And I have, you could count the number of events on there, but I'll save some time. We have had at least 15 public-facing events. We have been to places where no one showed up. We have been to places where one person showed up. I can tell you I also met with all of our teachers at every school and asked some questions about the budget. And I'm also grateful for the feedback from the school board and anyone that was willing to talk to give us feedback and input as we develop this process. Why is that important? Because it affects all of us. So again, I want to be very, very deliberate and thoughtful about that process. And if I'm missing something, please give me some feedback. What else do I need to do in addition to going up north, coming to the center, going to the south, putting it on the radio, putting it in press releases? I'm open to feedback if we could do something different next year. So these engagement activities, I think, are important because we value community input. So thinking about that picture, you see, I wish I could put a picture of all of our schools there. That's what this is all about. However, when we're looking at the number of adults and employees as well as the families we serve, it is very, very important that the finger points both ways, which is back at us on how can we do a better job and how can we really move forward this school district. So I hope you can see a lot of that in your knowledge of schools. You can see that, having a strong instructional leadership, not resting on our laurels, having supported learning environments, and then I'm grateful for the effective governance. When both boards work together on behalf of students, that's a good thing. So those are the factors that really make a difference between effective school systems and those that are not quite there. I could never do justice to the students you just saw. I can't, but those are 140 school districts. So on that chart, that scatter plot, what you see on the top, that's the percent poverty. So if you look in the top right corner, that's 0% poverty all the way to 100%. And then on the right side, you see another scale. That is the ranking. And you see that in Gloucester County Public Schools, we have about 42% poverty. And let me tell you, I speak from experience, children do not advertise their poverty. They come to school and want to have the same opportunity as those that live in a $2 million house on the water, so they come in. So what is our job as educators? Is to reach every child. But it takes money to overcome poverty because there's a bigger gap to cover. And thinking about research, that is really the one factor in education that good teachers and good systems address. So I can tell you that I could not be more proud of the work our staff are doing. And you could see that Gloucester is a top-performing school district. This is region 2 and 3. If you're thinking about 80 miles to the south, 80 miles to the north, and 50 miles to the west, that's what it looks like. When you account for poverty, our teachers, the staff, and with your support, we do very, very well. But we're never going to rest on our laurels because until every child maximizes their potential, we are not done. So again, I believe the reason I'm sharing this with you, because as we move into the slides, it's important to keep this in mind. Students and staff are the center of these decisions. And I share with you those statistics just to summarize them. And so thinking about challenges as well as opportunities on our in our reality. The reality, if we look at the Cooper Center from the UVA, we have steady to declining enrollment to FY28. Now, there was a lot of talk about Gloucester growing, but if you would look at population pyramids, and I presented that information earlier, there are areas anywhere between 45 and 72 that there's just a disproportionate number of folks. Sometimes people move into Gloucester and do not bring their kids with them. And so I think we need to monitor that. We need to work together, but we welcome enrollment because enrollment is directly related to the funds we receive. So thinking about this slide, this is the biennium 25-26. This is a slide I shared with you last year. We're looking at our LCI local composite index of 0.399. I like to round that up to about 0.4. What does that mean? It means that our locality, based on studies done and the information released by the Virginia Department of Education, is that the 40% of the funding is what's recommended. And I'll share more information on that. Should come from the locality. I come to you tonight with gratitude, and I want to explain why. If we're looking at this chart, in the blue column, if you look at the blue bars and you're looking for 21 to 24, that is the minimum local required effort. If we look at the green, that is the actual per pupil county share. And if we're looking at the gray, that is per pupil state share. So again, you're seeing that the majority of the funding comes from the state. And the blue is how much it costs to educate one child. So thinking about the overall budget, this is great information. And this is why our school district is great, because our boards work together on behalf of students. But our work is not done. And I shared it with the boards before. It takes money and funding to educate students. So I want to share with you some information, some updates. And last year, I'm very grateful for both of our boards for fully funding transportation. If we're looking at the growth that we have, we went from 1.2 to 1.6. I shared with the boards last year the price of bulbs, the price of brake pads, the price of tires. And there are a lot of bulbs on that bus, wires, fuses. There are a lot of consumables on these things. These are really trucks that carry students, and they wear parts. We have replacement of engines. So the transportation department really appreciated that extra funding, and we're able to increase our safety and the readiness of our fleets. And then, I'm sorry, and I mixed the slides up. That is the maintenance budget. So my narrative went with this slide right here. And I'll go back to this. In terms of maintenance and making sure that every door works, that sometimes we have roofing repairs that are not covered by warranty. And there are just a lot of different things to maintain our buildings. So again, we went from 1.2 to 1.6, and we filled that gap. Again, I'm grateful to both boards for doing that. So thinking about additional requests, and I want to just share some information with you. This is what I noticed within months or days of crossing the river. That if you are on the road in Gloucester, at any time, particularly in the morning or the afternoon, you'll see some of these vehicles. I've seen that vehicle with that paint job throughout Gloucester several times. Actually, it drives on my road. And we're putting vehicles in fleet, average age of 15.6 years. Now, think about the cars all of us drive. Now, I do like older cars, but I change their engines, and I maintain them, and I probably would not take them on a long trip. My wife certainly won't get in some of them. And thinking about the average miles, 133,809. 17 total vehicles that are in use daily. Now think about some of our students. These are students with disabilities that are generally transported to regional programs. We're also required by federal law to transfer students when we call our McKinney-Vento. That's, again, federal law that requires that. And this strategy saves both money that we're not using buses and drivers that we do not need a CDL to do that. So later on, you'll see that we'll have an additional request to start replacing some of these vehicles because, again, we put some of our most vulnerable students in these vehicles. And our transportation maintenance department, by the way, have these cars in their shop all the time and do a phenomenal job piecing together these vehicles. I believe, I don't know if anybody wants to guess, that looks like there's probably a 2006 Impala. I know I'm going to hear from somebody later that I might have gotten that wrong, but those are old cars.
Can I ask a question? Mr. Chair. Okay. We have a brand-new bus garage, and so is there possible opportunities for some of the students to work during the summer to learn auto tech? Do we do that already? We do that already.
And
it's in the works. Okay.
Thank you for asking that question, because later on you'll see that one of the things we want to do is actually give these students who have interest, an opportunity for an internship earlier. So that presentation later on, we want to hire them. Stay in Gloucester, get a job, fix diesel mechanics. And I think we had an individual who actually stayed with us after the high school and gave us several good years in that department. So you'll see in this recommended budget some funding to develop the workforce here in Gloucester in places like the garage. So these are some slides. I know I provided some background information, but now I want to get into the specific numbers, and I grouped them together. So when we look at our strategic priority, every single investment needs to move the ball forward for this district. So goal 1 and instruction and academic achievement, and I have a slide for these. Goal 2, strengthening community connections. Goal 3, an investment or an additional investment over the previous year of $780,000. Goal 4, $30,958 to ensure safe schools and secure transportation. And goal 5, $382,825. I do want to explain that goal 1 is because it includes compensation and a lot of factors that are related to the delivery of instruction. And personnel costs, as Ms. Steele referenced earlier, are the most expensive part of running a district. But I'll give additional details related to each of those priorities. So we start with goal 1, instruction and academic achievement. Our recommendation is to provide a 4.5% raise, which includes a 1 step plus the cost of living allowance, with a total cost of $2,512,807. We know health insurance grows annually. We expect a 14% increase to the tune of $601,265. This is the COE program that we discussed. So it's not just at the bus garage, but what if you want to be a teacher? Can we hire as a teacher's aide? What if you want to be a plumber? Can we do an internship and then pay you, hire you as an employee, process it to HR, do the background check, and then while you're still in high school, and then maybe we can hire you as a program. So $50,000 allotted to developing workforce here in Gloucester, and I think that's going to help out. Last year, we proposed a half-time, part-time gifted teacher. We could not fill that position, so this is an additional 0.5 to make that a whole position, $47,611, the price tag for that. The next two are mandated increases. New Horizons, an additional $108,274. The majority of that funding in New Horizons goes to special education. And Middle Peninsula Special Education Program, an additional $104,764. The items in italic text denote changes from the last presentation. And one of the things we're in the process of doing right now is looking at all of our textbooks. I understand that history textbooks are probably as old as sometime when we graduated. And as just an example, we invested approximately $500,000 last year from the All-In Tutoring and Literacy text at the elementary level. But our work needs to include every single year an allotment to make sure that our students have accurate and up-to-date textbooks, which also helps with teacher retention because it gives you a source of information to help with planning, and that includes consumables, not just thinking about old school, just the textbook. A lot of times they're electronic, they're OER, online educational resources, and subscriptions. And then the $526,000, again, an additional proposal. We're looking at Chromebooks now, the first tier that are 5 years old. And so we're looking at a 5-year-old laptop. If you try to maintain one of those, the warranties are out. And it's, again, we are proposing that we replace. And that's about 25% of the total number of devices in the district.
Dr. Vladu, before you change that slide, is it possible, and you don't have to give me this tonight, can we see, you got one step plus COLA equals a $2.512 million. Can we see what that is broken out, the raise with the COLA moved out of it, or the step moved out of it, just so we can see that going in the future?
Absolutely, we'll provide that data because part of that comes from the state. Part of it later on, you'll see that it comes from adjustment to enrollment, and part of it comes from additional requests. So I'll break that down for the information and provide it to both boards and work with Ms. Steele to make sure you had that information. Thank you. So goal 3, efficiency of operation, fiscal responsibility, transportation, and human resources. Again, the signage at Page, Botetourt, and Petsworth, we hope we could do all of the signage. This would be something we would take care of the first year, then come back and try to do something next year. I referenced the fleet vehicles. About $150,000 buys you about 3 Dodge Caravans. Probably not leather, just cloth, just the basic stuff. Maintenance and parts and supplies, that $100,000 is for inflation. We know that last year we made transportation whole, but I would think between a year, last year and this year, when you go to the parts store or you order them, that those parts are going to cost more. And then later on, Mr. Duran is going to provide you a detailed update on food services. So I know you probably have a lot of questions about the $450,000 CEP, but again, he's going to provide a detailed update on food services as part of this presentation. So the total investment in there for $780,000. Now, goal 4, we have an additional investment of $30,958. We know that bus drivers are hard to find. You can't teach them if you don't bring them to school. And so in order to remain competitive, this does not put us at the top of the list. This is just to have the minimum starting pay at $20. So that would require $30,958. This is based on the 4.5% to make that difference to bring them up to $20 starting pay per hour. Now, goal 5, promoting mental health and wellness. I have had numerous conversations with teachers, and one of the challenges that they're having is with the skill set needed to deal with a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old who cannot communicate, who acts out in a way that basically ties up 3, 4, 5 adults. Now, again, I'm a high school person. At the high school, you break the rules, You get suspended and you go home. It's not like that with young children. We all had young children. When you think about the 4-year-olds, whether they're your grandchildren or whether they're your sons or daughters, when you're dealing with that age, oftentimes their intent is not to hurt an adult. Their intent is maybe frustration, maybe what they see at home sometimes in acting out in violent ways, but their intent is not to assault adults. And so what is the skill set needed to look into the antecedents? I can tell you sometimes we respond differently to teachers. As a child, I might respond differently to a man than I might respond to a female teacher, and vice versa. And so we need to develop our skill set in order to deal with those challenges. So we are recommending 3 elementary behavior interventionists for a total of $229,695. And to, again, we need some school-based social workers to assist with some of these challenges that our schools are facing. And I do want to say that these are not additional positions, and I'll explain that later. These are, again, from the adjustment to enrollment, and we do expect to have some savings. So these are not additional positions, but I'll get into that in just a little bit. So here's the slide. We know that, I would say since 2020, we lost about 409 students. I think about that slide I just shared with you about the county contribution per student and the state contribution per student. So to the tune of $9,300 state funding. So when you lose students like that, you end up with smaller class sizes below the recommended oftentimes. We end up with really a situation where it's just an adjustment and an efficiency is required. And, you know, these are, again, very thoughtful, very deliberate. However, when you lose students, the business side of things required us to make an adjustment to staffing. And even with these recommendations, we would still maintain the lowest class averages around. Again, these are very, very well thought out and appropriate recommendations. So we're looking at adjusting for declining enrollment. That is a total loss of 18 positions. And just to be clear, those are primarily at the middle school and high school level. Declining enrollment, we know we have at least one retirement and counseling attrition there. That is, again, because we've lost 409 students, and the staffing there stays the same with counselors since, I want to say, excluding ESSER, since 2020. Central office and administrative attrition, 328,730, and non-payroll adjustments. So we're looking at savings or new revenues, depending how we look at it, but these are additional funding to offset the gap. That number, those numbers I showed you on that page when we had the priorities, that was a little bit over $5 million. This eats into that $5 million to ensure that we use our resources appropriately. So budget outlook summary, instruction and academic achievement. I read all of this previously in the interest of time when we're looking at totaling $5,548,569, with the total available funding is $3,511,485. And what this does, it leaves us with a gap of $2,037,084. Again, everything on the slide that particularly previously included additional expenses or additional recommendations since the last presentation. I just want to be cognizant as well. This is based on the calc tool that was released on or about February 22nd. This is the crossover budget. The governor still has the pen. And so I think in a couple of days, I think within a week's time, we hope that he does not slash it anymore, because that would make the gap grow a little bit more. So before I go on, I know Mr. Duran has kind of closed this out, and I do food service. There's quite a bit new of information on food service, and then this is really a summary slide. But I want to open it up to you. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, we'll take them.
Mr. Anderson?
Just one piece for clarification on that. That next slide you have up, 21, the summary slide. So I'm looking at the FY25 superintendent recommended budget local has 3424,128, and then the FY26 recommended budget local has 3424,128, which is the same, no increase. But shouldn't that have been updated based on that previous slide to cover that gap of 2037084?
Mr. Duran, do you want to comment on that slide?
Yes, so if you look here at the funding gap line there, that is where that additional appropriation could possibly come from the Board of Supervisors. So that's, if you combine that local with that funding gap, that's when you get that total new revenue number for local.
I think we said the same thing, just in a slightly different way, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Based on that, what is the amount on that slide that you would anticipate locally? 50,000? Increase from the county? Well, I know that, but all of it from the county? Okay. Okay. Can we go back to page 17? Right now, the current bus drivers are starting at $18.87, and you get a 4.5% increase. That would put them at $19.72. So does this take into account moving everybody over $20 an hour and giving them the 0.45% increase plus the 28 cents?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Does that include their fringes as well? That's just their salary.
Well, the 14% increase to health insurance would cover the fringe for everybody. That's so again, this is entirely on the salary.
I'm talking about just the bus drivers.
Yes, sir, but all the health insurance is included in a separate line item.
And you said that on page 19, the attrition for staffing due to declining enrollment is 1,370. What subjects are you anticipating? I know it's early. Are you looking at deleting any subjects or just lowering staff?
Thank you for that question. So no, our course offering, there is absolutely no change, but this is what it looks like. It's really a master scheduling efficiency. So if we're having, in a perfect example, and I know you've been visiting schools, whether you're in principal for a day or at the secondary level. When you go into a classroom and you see 10 students, and then you go into other classroom, same exact classroom, like in English, and you see another 11. Well, you combine that for a class, or you combine several classes to make sure that at a minimum you have, 19 to 20 is a nice example, but 7 or 8 is really not an efficient. In my experience as a high school teacher, in all of the, principal and assistant principal, all my experience with master schedule, if a class didn't have 15, it didn't go unless it was required for graduation. So we need to look at those efficiencies, and we've done that work with Ms. Hutz and Mr. Duran to think about if we have 40 sections of English, and our average class, let's say, is, 17, or an increase to 19 or 20 doesn't break the bank. It's actually an efficiency that's effective. And so we'll look very, very carefully. This has been based on a study and months of work and Excel spreadsheets and formulas to make sure that it's feasible and achievable.
Okay.
This was a question we asked as well earlier in our presentations to make sure, when we were looking at the elementary levels, because if you were to take a teacher away from any grade level, it would increase class sizes, beyond what we would be desirable. So that we were assured that that would not be the case, correct?
The caveat is division averages. I think individual, it's almost like that commercial we've seen, individual results may vary. You may have a variation of 23 and a 16. And so you may say, well, why do I have 23? Well, that's because your neighbor has the other part, sometimes with scheduling. But our projected elementary class size, and I may have to ask Ms. Hutz, is 20-1. Board recommendation is 19-1. And that's the division average.
Ms. Steele.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I was just trying to find where thank you. That slide right there, the 2.3 million, where that is reflected in the budgets. So in other words, you're cutting 2.3 of expenses that you're not going to have these same teachers. Where is that shown in comparison to the new additions? Because you've got, your priorities and things, and I just can't find it, and I'm sure it's me.
Mr. Durden, do you want to answer that question?
Yes, so all of those adjustments we have there are worked into all of our expenditures. So those staffing adjustments are going to come from our payroll lines, of course. Same thing with the counseling attrition. The non-payroll adjustments are mainly due to declining enrollment. So various non-payroll lines that we have throughout our budget, as well as the central office administrative attrition as well. So that's all worked into our payroll budget. Does that answer your question, Ms. Steele?
I think so. I'm sorry.
She's asking for the accounting of that. Where's the,
Because what
the
I
variance.
thought when I was following, I was looking, okay, there's a need for 5.5 million more, but you're subtracting from that 2.3. So I was thinking, okay, you need 3.2, and you have 3.5. So I was like, you're in the good. So I'm $2 million off in my figuring, and I'm sorry again. It may be that it's shown. I was looking to see if it was reflected on slide 21, maybe. Because if you would see a change, and maybe as you're saying it's absorbed within something.
I can answer this in a method that I think won't help. So on slide 20, the total funding available is the sum of that $2,336,626 in available resources, plus another $1.73859 in additional state funding from the crossover budget. So when you sum those two numbers, it's $3,511,485. And I only know that because I did the same thing you just did and had to do that to get to that point. So yes.
Dr. Vladu, just point of clarification for me, because down here in the tunnel, I'm having a little difficult hearing. This 18 positions that you have in your budget to cut, or whatever your term you want to use, is some of that going to be based on positions that we have on the board right now that are not filled, or I guess if I put my question out to the way it is, I've been approached by some constituents who are uneasy, and I don't have the answer, and I'm certainly not a school board member, but they are a little bit uneasy. So one of the questions that was asking me, and I said I would bring it to the forefront, is some of this going to go from, is some of this going to come from some of the jobs we already have that are posted, or of retirements that we already know about in the coming year?
Thank you for asking that question, because I do want to clear that up for not just for your constituents, but anybody thinking about who are these 18. And our analysis is on attrition only. So thinking about retirements, every year when we're sitting in the retirement ceremony and looking at the number of resignations, we average anywhere between 45 to 60 as a district. So, some of those positions will not be replaced, not all of them. So that's important. As a point of reference in thinking about, the size, at least the staffing ratio, we've been here before in FY20. So thinking about what's the point of reference of what classes might look like, this analysis was based on FY20. If you walked around Gloucester High School in FY20, and you walked around Page and Peasley in FY20, that's what class sizes are likely to look like. That's what the analysis is based on in my line graph that I presented to the board a couple of times ago. So again, thank you so much for that clarification, because I certainly don't want staff to lose sleep at night thinking about the future.
Good evening, members of the board. I am pleased to kind of wrap up this presentation. So the recommended FY26 budget request, when you look at our 26 recommended budget, we're looking at $245,651 coming from federal. From the state, we are looking at $43,346,837. We're looking at local. We are expecting this $30,424,128 plus the $2,037,084, which brings us to, give me 1 second, $32,461,212. Miscellaneous local, we're expecting that to be $114,000, which brings our total for the operating budget to $76,167,700,000, which is a decrease of 0.37%. As compared to the 25 budget. When looking at Central Food Services, we're looking at $3,836,107. We'll go into a little more detail about that fund in a second here. And we're also looking to set up a grants fund with $2,875,722 in federal funding, state funding $600,750, local grant funding of $50,000, bringing us a total for FY26 of $3,526,472, bringing that total FY26 recommended budget amount to $83,530,279, which is an increase of 2.53%. We're looking at our projected revenues for the grants fund. We have annual recurring grants that are in italics there. So on the federal side, we have the Carl Perkins grant for CTE equipment. That is $89,760. Title I for improvement of instruction, $935,000. Title II for teacher and principal training at $188,262. Title IV for student and academic enrichment at $45,000. And then Title VI-B, which goes to our students with disabilities, of $1,322,700. We additionally have a line there for unanticipated federal grants of $295,000. That brings the total federal grant request to $2,875,722. In regards to the state grants, we have the State Security Equipment Grant, which we receive every year, of $138,250. We have the Virginia Tiered Support System Grant, that is $37,500, and the school SSO grant of $225,000. And then for unanticipated state grants, we have $200,000 there as a placeholder in case we receive additional grant funds that we were not anticipating at the beginning of the year. When it comes to current local grants, we don't have any that we were expecting, but we may apply for and receive grants. So that's why we have that unanticipated grant fund line for local grants of $50,000, bringing our total grant fund to $3,526,472. Then when looking at our food services, we are hoping to be able to continue our CEP program, but we do know there's a lot of uncertainty at the federal level when it comes to funding some of the USDA programs. So we presented last school board meeting worst, likely, and a best case scenario when it comes to food services. So the worst case scenario, we're looking at $2,538,418. That is assuming that the state money has already been published on the state calc tool. That's $102,697. That's why it's the same in all three of the scenarios. In the worst case scenario, we're relying a little more on local sales because we are pulling away from the CEP program. That would be $1,394,502 is what we would expect. And we will still expect some federal revenue for the students that are the highest need with the free reduced lunch of about $1,041,219. The likely scenario is what we have presented in our budget, but the best case scenario, we're looking at being able to maintain the CEP program and having local sales go up slightly by 3%, as well as being able to increase our federal participation rate to get that number up to $3,399,000, bringing that total for the best case scenario to $4,023,384 in revenue. So that brings us to our next steps. We are here at the Board of Supervisors meeting. We need to get a final budget over to the Board of Supervisors by April 1st. And then we will take your deliberations and rework our budget and hopefully have a final budget voted by May 13th. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions, take any comments or concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Duran. Could you please just explain what the CEP is? A lot of people might not know what that acronym stands for and what the program is.
Yes, so that's the Community Eligibility Program that supports school divisions with high poverty in order to have everyone that attends the school division be able to eat for free. So that means that that money, the food gets paid for by the school division, but we submit everything to the federal government for reimbursement, and that's what supports the program, federal funds.
So all students get free meals at the schools?
Yes,
And is
this
that
year.
paid for by the CEP program?
That is paid for by the CEP program this year. We are also using a good amount of fund balance in order to make that program viable this year, and that's why we are looking at potentially propping it up with the $450,000 request that Dr. Vladu added in his budget since the last presentation.
So is it means tested?
I'm sorry?
Is it means tested? Those who can afford to pay for lunches and those who cannot afford, is it means tested? It is not.
No, you've qualified based on poverty rate.
Okay.
I think Mr. Bazzani's question is, are free reduced lunch means tested currently for the students? No, it's for every student.
Right, because we have the grant, because we.
Mr. Chair? I've been quiet the whole meeting. You should be proud of me. So could you go back to slide 19? So we were talking about declining enrollment here. There are a lot of factors that are controlling declining enrollment, and it's not just people moving away. We're talking about kids that drop out. We've got homeschooling, and we've got early graduation. I'm not sure if the board of Supervisors have heard Dr. Vladu talk about early graduation, which actually hits our numbers when it comes to enrollment. Dr. Vladu, could you touch on those three things for us, please?
Certainly. So our team have had in-depth discussion and preliminary planning on how to address these challenges of enrollment. So let's go before COVID. Before COVID, there was talk in education about virtual learning anytime, anywhere. I mean, I remember that. You don't have to raise your hand. But at some point, we're going to lose that some students needed the flexibility. During COVID, we began to associate virtual learning with COVID not being in the building. So one thing we can do is develop a multi-online provider where our teachers, if they want to, can teach courses and make money and be paid for that, and we would capture the 9,300. And so that would be, again, we would be in the positive and provide some flexibility to parents. So that is one, that's not happening right now, but that's something we need to have discussions. It's going to require thinking differently. It's going to require developing policy. So that would, again, would address the need. Also, when students sometimes get suspended or long-term, and they have to go to impact. We have had some families that are just pulling their kids out to the tune of $9,300 plus the local funding. And what if we were to develop additional flexibility with parents had choices? Again, you're still out, you're not in the building, we're still honoring that. And then recapturing some homeschooling. The discussion about achievement is extremely important. You saw those pictures and those students present. Our community wants to be a part of that. I mean, who doesn't with kids to see the young men and women that presented here tonight and all those pictures at the high school and our schools? So we need to do a better job in getting our stories out. So there's just a number of strategies to capture. No, we're not going to go back to zero. Parents have a right to homeschool. However, we worry about the students that are transient, the poverty, that I'm pulling my child out, I might not have a good program, and now I have a gap in my learning. And so we are going to come back and with some specific strategies on how to address that. Even if we capture 100 students, 150, that's in the positive to sort of address that need. So more to come on that, but we are very, very close and having some recommendations that are substantive and doable. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vladu.
Yes, sir.
Okay. No, I said thank you, Dr.
Oh,
Vladu.
If I could,
Yes.
my fellow school board members, are there any questions about this budget? Because we have an opportunity tonight if we want to adopt this budget or not.
I do have one more question because I think it's important before we figure out what we're going to do. Slide 21. The total operating line, FY25 superintendent's recommended budget doesn't match the actual local operating budget for FY25 listed in our executive summary that's on the web. But I think the difference isn't the difference I come up with is $1,345,000. That's the all-in school funding difference, right?
Mr. Duran, can you provide clarification on those calculations?
Yes, that is correct. It's taking that all-in tutoring funding out of that particular state line.
Because it looks, I know the devil's in the detail, but it just looks funny to say that we're going to operate overall at a lower operating budget in FY26 than we did at FY25 when that's not it. It's all tied back to the reality of the all-in funding that was given at one point that still exists that hasn't been spent. I'm just making sure I clarify that for the record.
Thank you, that is correct.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
So with that, I'd certainly make a motion that the school board adopt the FY26 recommended budget as presented on slide 21.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion to accept the budget and a second. No, Ms. Brazil, can you please pull the board?
Mr. Drew?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Andersen?
Yes.
Ms. Saulman?
Yes.
Ms. Scruggs?
Yes.
Ms. Arsenovic?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion from our Board of Supervisors? Any other discussion from our Board of Supervisors? Yes, sir.
We've got, our next meeting is going to be on next Monday. I would like to request staff, because we're hearing a lot of different issues back and forth about what happened to the money that was available for the fire station. If you could work up a presentation for us to where the money is, what happened, what the numbers are, and work them out so we have them, and we can go from there.
Okay. Any other? Okay.
Well, I think that finishes the school board's portion of the evening, unless there are other questions or comments. I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that the school board adjourn and leave the board to their rest of their agenda items with great appreciation for another joint meeting. Thanks.
We have a first, we have a second? Second. By Ms. Scruggs. So first and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chair?
Board of Supervisors, can we recess for about 5 minutes? Back into session here. Okay, discussion.
Are you presenting this, or is this just for
Ms. Steele.
Before
First.
we begin, if I could just make one quick announcement to let you all know that we've had the streaming problem again. And I know that I had difficulty watching the last school board meeting, so we're making contact with all the tech people. We're not sure exactly why we're having the problem, and we're still checking into it. So we're going to be back to the same thing of having to convert the video like we did before and then post it. So you may hear from some people
I got
who
a
are
text message
frustrated.
that said it was working, but it's glitchy.
That's exactly it. And it's kind of like a speed thing that we're trying to figure out. So if I can, Mr. Chair, you have before you the information that was presented last night for a potential tax advertising rate. And the board recalls that the budget that I presented would create a 4.3 cent real estate increase, and I was suggesting that the board go up and have additional room, and so instead of doing 4.3 up, go up to a total of 6 cents, which would bring you at the 0.643. We also had discussion that about the personal property, and so that is still shown as it was last night of a potential 10 cents to advertise from the current 2.95 rate. I'd like to note that with the budget that the school board just approved for you, that you have the 4.3, this would be an additional 3.6. So what I proposed would not be enough to meet their request.
We need another 1.9 on what is on this sheet to fully fund the schools.
That is with the governor providing with the better budget that came from the General Assembly. If the governor signs that, so it could be worse than that.
Ms. Steele, do we know with regard to all the budgets, that the federal side of the budget that was presented to us for the schools, are those numbers solid given what we have been hearing from the federal government?
I believe they're as solid as they can be.
Okay, but we don't know, are they reimbursable or the ones that we know we get from I don't know which group they're coming from, because the Department of Education obviously is under duress and they're losing people. So what, the numbers we see are the numbers we think we're going to get, or do we know if that's could change?
That's all that's known to this point, so I think the board would have to work under the assumption that this is will be coming down the line, and if something changes, then the board may, and if it was a very severe change, would have to look at coming up with cuts, re-advertising the budget, things like that. But I don't think I don't anticipate knowing much more based on what I've heard and what's through the national groups, that we'll know more on that yet.
So are we, Ms. Steele or Mr. Chriscoe, are we suggesting that we advertise not at 6.43, but whatever, 6.43, 0.643 plus 1 point?
1.9.
1.66? It would be 0.662 would be my math that I did. Because if that's the case, we've just spent, if we're going to leave it at the 0.643 the last 2.5 hours, we shouldn't have held that meeting.
Right.
Because what they're asking for us to even consider fully funding the schools, if we don't advertise at 0.662, we're already telling the schools thanks but no thanks. My opinion.
But that is also not taking into account any wiggle room that Ms. Steele proposed over the amount of her recommended budget and the amount that we had extra, the 1.6.
We were at 4.3 in the proposed budget, and we were this number, this 0.643 is 1.4 cent above what, or 1.7, what she proposed to be the budget last night. It was at 4.3.
True.
And these numbers are at the 6. Honestly, for me, you know, we all know that we are not going to fully, probably not going to fully fund the schools, but not being able to even consider it for our budget work sessions, I think is inappropriate. I don't know what we're going to do at all. But to leave it to where that option is not on the table, or if something happens between us advertising or agreeing to the advertisement rate tonight and adoption at the state level where we have to overcome a gap, I don't know if 0.662 is enough either.
I know.
Mr. Chair, I also want to remind you that with the rate that we're looking at for the penny on the personal property, that if you went up 10 cents, that would generate $460,178. So just wanted to throw that out into that equation. What was that again? $460,178 for doing a 10-cent increase on personal property. And actually, that's looking at, does that include the business or not? That's just personal property with vehicles, right?
I don't, yeah, it should just be, no, we went back to all personal property.
Yes, it's all personal.
It's all personal
Okay,
property.
so we want to make sure it included the other.
No, we went back to that.
Okay.
So that personal property tax increase doesn't even represent 1 penny on the real estate. Less than, it's about 80% of about it. But it still helps if we do it.
I think the main thing we need to look at is where the advertised rate for the real estate, the manufactured home, and the public service corporations, those amounts is where we need to look at. Do we put it to the 0.662, the 0.665, 0.66, or 0.643? I agree with Mr. Chriscoe. If we leave it at 0.643, we're just saying we're not doing anything with the schools.
Correct.
Regardless of what we do, we need to be mindful of what's available.
Right. It's the perception that we're telling the schools thanks but no thanks. So let me find my paperwork.
So what are you going to recommend, Mr. Chriscoe? I mean, obviously the discussion is kind of being directed from your point of view. We haven't heard from other board members about what we should be doing given the presentation that was just given to us. And what they're asking, what was it, 2.3 million?
2 million,
2.4 million?
3.6
Oh, 3 point.
pennies. 2 million.
3.6 cents.
2 million, sorry, 2,337,000 and change.
Right.
Of an increase over the, this year's funding.
So what you're going to end up with is a recurring cost every year that we'll have to make up every year if you do the state, the overall salary increases for all employees, as opposed to maybe even us considering bonuses where it becomes non-recurring.
But for schools, aren't we dictated by what happens at the state? If the state says we do this, then we have the obligation to come up with the additional amount?
Sometimes, and it would appear in the budget language that there would be a match that would be needed from the locality in order for the state to give us that money. I know typically we always do that. I know there was 1 year or maybe 2 years that this board decided no. I mean, I can remember us not taking that match just simply because it was too hard of a pill to swallow at that time. I don't like that. I also, there's still some other information out there. I asked Dr. Vladu for the breakdown of the STEP and the COLA, the difference from what those are. The majority of the major corporations that I've been following, watching all the everything, they're giving 2% increases. There's no 4%. There's I don't mention COLA, it's that your COLA this year is 2%. And that's the majority of your major corporations, if they've even given that. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to give all the rate. I don't know where I'm going to end up. I don't want to lock myself into not being able to discuss funding the schools what they've asked for. I want to be able to have that discussion.
Well, I mean, we've always said the advertise rate is important because what we advertise, we can't change it above. We can always go lower. And that's the critical issue in front of us. Do we adopt or advertise a rate higher than what Ms. Steele has presented here to include the additional amount in case we want to fully fund the school? But then when we get down to the nitty-gritty, which we will, starting on Monday, start considering things that would allow us to lower that tax rate from what is advertised to something that we will eventually adopt. Yeah, the problem we're going to have, of course, when we advertise, people think that is the rate that they're going to get. There's nothing that we can do to change that perception. You know, it's our job to let the constituents know this is what we have to do. But if you look at our past actions, generally, if we adopt a rate, advertise a rate that's higher, we have always adopted a rate that has generally been lower than the advertised rate. Although I don't have any historical numbers to back that, but I sense that is some of the things that have happened in the past.
Does anyone have information on what we advertised for last year? What did we advertise?
We did not advertise an increase, so we didn't have the ability to
So
do.
we didn't advertise an increase last year?
No.
Okay.
Right.
So we did level fund the schools, correct?
I think it was a $500,000 difference, yes. Was it level? Okay.
Okay, so that's 2 years, it would be level funded if we did that this year. Okay.
I mean, the bottom line, whatever we do tonight, we know starting on Monday, that's when the rubber hits the road for us to think really carefully how we want to end up at the end of April with the type of tax rate that we want to actually adopt.
But you've got to remember also, last year when we did our budget, we used funds out of the fund balance to balance our budget because we didn't have a tax increase.
Correct.
Right, and that was one thing that I mentioned the other night, Mr. Chriscoe.
Last year.
I mean, Mr. Hutson was the only person that voted against the budget, specifically because he did not think we should be using fund balance for operating. And now that's not the case in this year's budget.
So for easy math,
I'm prepared to make a motion.
that's what I was getting ready to do. I was going to say 0.67 and go with it.
And 310 on the tangible personal property to make it more of a penny.
310? Okay.
310.
Make it closer, or maybe a little bit more than a penny. That's mine. And everything, the bottom five stay the same, the top four are 0.67, or the top three are 0.67, and the tangible personal property tax is 310, and I'll make that in the form of a motion.
I know you need to do a second, but I have a clarification question when you're done.
Well, why don't you second, and then we could discuss it.
Second move, any question?
Is there a 9 after the 7?
No, it's just 0.67.
6.7.
Okay.
Instead of 0.662 is what was my calculation that would have fully funded the school based, to add that to your 0.643. I decided to just make it a 0.67.
6.7.
That's the number. $203,700. 203,7084. So, but still at advertising at 0.67
0.67.
and 3.1, and I'll second that.
Okay, second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just one comment,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chair. It's shameful that when you buy a vehicle and you pay taxes on it, not only a sales tax, but a tax to the state, and then you're consistently paid taxes every year on a vehicle that's depreciating in value. Hopefully, the state will come to their senses and get rid of car taxes altogether. But we'll see.
Well, the car tax, that was a great idea, but then the counties realized the funding they were losing, so we obviously got some input from them, and whether that ever changes, we can complain, but the state has us over the barrel and tells us what to do and gives us unfunded mandates, but that's where we are.
What was it, 47 per penny? 47 what? 46178.
Any further discussion?
Hold on a second, if you will.
Yes,
please.
we will.
We're probably short on that because we should probably be raising it to offset the money that's been lost. But where we're at is probably close enough.
If my calculations are right, just on personal property tax at the 295, if we were to do away with the tax, it'd be roughly $13.6 million. Revenue lost if we were to get rid of the car tax or our personal property tax. We can't do that.
No. Okay. Any further? No further? Okay, is this a poll vote or just, okay. Ms. Steele, will you please poll the board?
Mr. Hutson? Yes. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
No.
Mr. Nicosia? Yes. Mr. Gibson?
No.
Dr. Orth? Yes. Okay. Motion carries.
Okay.
Could I ask the people that voted no, was it because they think they should be higher or lower? I'd be curious.
Lower. Where? You're going to have to come, well, I'm not going to do it publicly here, but we'll discuss it, but we have to come to a affordability issue. And so we have our own issues, the schools have their own issues. We have to come to some medium for both sides. And I don't think the full amounts is the right amount.
But again, the advertised rate is never what we end up adopting. But so, are you voting no from the philosophical perspective that you feel we really shouldn't be advertising at that rate, but it should be lower because we're going to be lower, or what? I'm just curious because I think these are when we vote on things as important as this, people should know why we're voting the way we're voting.
It's just a matter of tightening your belt one more notch.
I know. Mr. Gibson, I'm curious.
My vote speaks for itself. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, here's why I agree. And I'll tell you why I agree with the 0.67 and why I made the motion. Because the 0.67 is still not fully funding our Gloucester County folks' request. Because that would have been 11 cents and then another 3 cents. So we're still less than half of what people requested in their budgets for this year. And knowing how this process has gone for me the last 12 years, I know that we're not going to be at 0.67. But I also know that last year, we basically couldn't even discuss the budget. We had all these meetings scheduled. I think we held like 2 extras, and we just waited for us to pass the budget. This year, we have an opportunity to right-size what we need to do in Gloucester County because next year we have a reassessment. So this number is going to change, and it'll change again next year. I have fought budget increases and tax increases my entire time on the board. Not because I think it's the prudent thing, but it's because every time my hand touches my pocket, I pay a tax. And, it gets frustrating at times. But I also know that if we do not properly fund this county and our school system, we will continue to atrophy and become nothing but a bedroom community.
I'm sure we will have ample opportunity
To discuss
to discuss a lot of this starting on Monday. And I think Ms. Steele has asked repeatedly if there are groups of people or whatever that should come to us. But I think we all know that the devil's in the details for each of these departments, and we have to look very carefully at what is exactly in the budget for every single department and every single facility. It's not going to be easy.
Do we have the spreadsheet that we always get?
We
to look at
promised we
early?
would have it, we mentioned it last night, we promised we'll have it by the end of the week.
Thank you.
So we're almost there.
Oh, that's okay. I overslept.
Okay. Okay, I see on here the authorization to set public hearings. What is that? We just did all of that, so we're straight?
The only public hearing we have is April 1 for utilities coming up.
It's on the agenda, that's why I'm asking.
And then we have Ms. Steele's public presentation to the general public.
So the resolution that was in your packet authorized, set the tax rates that you wanted to advertise and authorized the public hearing to be held on April 14th.
Yeah.
So you made the motion
Okay.
and voted on the
So
tax
that was
rates.
already included. Okay, good. All right. Wait a second. All in favor? Aye.